On December 26, 1895, at the Salon Indien du Grand Café in Paris, a 20-minute presentation of 10 short films became the talk of the town. It wasn't the first time that people had paid to watch a movie, but this event changed entertainment forever. So much so that we get the word cinema from the device that made this all possible. This is the story of Auguste and Louis Lumière, the inventors of the cinematograph. Well, hello there! Ready to talk film with Old Man Kelly? Today we're going to talk about the Lumière Brothers, Auguste and Louis Lumière. Auguste was born in 1862 in Bazin, France, and 2 years later his brother Louis was born. Eventually they'd be joined by one more brother and 3 sisters, but we're not concerned about them. Their father was Charles Antoine, who was a painter who opened his own photographic portrait studio and eventually his own factory for making photographic plates. Unfortunately, even with Louis and a younger sister working long hours at the factory, it looked like it was headed for bankruptcy. But that was before Auguste returned from the military, and him and his brother began working on how to automate the factory. And they also created a new kind of photographic plates called etiquette blue, a revolutionary dry plate process, which I don't really understand. But by 1864, they were so successful that they employed dozens of workers, and they were making up to 15 million plates a year. They were doing pretty well. One day, their father, Charles Antoine, saw a new device from America, Thomas Edison's kinescope. And he came home and told his sons about it and told them that, I want you to find a better way to do this, to show films. You see, the kinescope was this large, bulky, heavy box that you had to look, one person at a time, had to look down in and see a film about 20 seconds, 30 seconds long that wasn't all that clear. The brothers were originally against doing this, as they had their own things going on, but Dad insisted, so the brothers did what Dad wanted. And they saw several limitations with Edison's device. The first problem was both the camera and projector, which were two separate things, were huge, heavy, and bulky. They were battery operated, they used motors, they were noisy. And of course, these devices only allowed for one person to view them at a time. And the picture wasn't all that clear because the film went through the projector at a continuous flow. There wasn't, well, we'll get into that. The brothers thought, wouldn't it be better if it was projected, the film was projected onto a wall or screen so a whole crowd of people could view it at the same time? In fact, Auguste later wrote, "We'd observed, my brother and I, how interesting it would be if we could project on a screen and show before a whole gathering animated scenes faithfully reproducing objects and people in movement." Now here's an example of one of Thomas Edison's films shot in the Black Maria. All his films sort of look like this, and it's probably a little sharper than it was back in the day because it's not being shown with the continuous flow of film that Thomas Edison's original invention had. So the brothers came up with what they called the cinematograph, and it had a lot of advantages over Edison's kinescope. First, it was hand cranked, so it was very light and portable. You could take it outside, inside. It wasn't fixed like Edison's Black Maria camera. It served as a camera, projector, and film duplicator, which was pretty amazing, a 3-in-1 device. But the most important invention of this, besides the fact it could project the motion pictures onto a wall, was what they called the claw. This came to Louis one night when he couldn't sleep. I guess Louis was plagued by constant headaches. And one night when he had one of these bad headaches and he couldn't sleep, he thought of a sewing machine, the mechanism inside a sewing machine, and incorporated that into their film camera and projector. The idea was if you put holes in the side of the film, the sprocket holes which we know today, and you had a claw put into those holes, you could move a frame into position, hold it there, turn the light on for 1/16 of a second, which was the frame rate they decided on, turn the light off, go to the next frame, hold it there, turn the light on over and over at 16 frames a second, And this resulted in a nice clear picture projected onto the wall, a huge advantage over Edison's device. One of the first films they made was this one here, where they set up a camera outside their own factory at the end of the working day, and they shot 800 frames of what some people consider the first real film ever made. It's called Workers Leaving the Lumière Factory in Lyon, and it actually has a French name that I won't attempt to pronounce. This is the same location as it exists today. It's now the Institut Lumière based in Lyon. Some of the other films that they shot were this one, Baby's Breakfast. That's Auguste and his wife and their baby daughter having breakfast in the countryside. And this one's very famous, Train Pulling Into the Station. Now there's rumors that people freaked out when they saw this in the theater, screaming and running out of the theater as if a train was really going to hit them. I've also read reports that that was highly exaggerated and that's sort of a myth that came out of the early days of print. And this one's called The Waterer Watered. Some consider the first comedy, in which a boy tricks a gardener into squirting water into his own face. This one actually has a bit of a story, and some consider it the first step towards narrative film. The brothers began having private screenings of their work, like one for the Society for the Development of the National Industry. And they were surprised that people were more interested in their films than their other work, like their experiments into color photography. One such man who saw these early screenings was George Méliès, who would go on himself to be a film pioneer, most famously for his film A Trip to the Moon. Méliès attempted to buy the cinematograph from the brothers, but they refused. In fact, they had quite a few offers from people wanting to buy their equipment, but they said no. So on December 26, 1895, at a cafe in Paris, 33 people paid 1 franc apiece to watch 10 films made by the brothers. The whole event took about 20 minutes. Auguste and Louis weren't even there that night. It was held by their father. The cafe had seating for about 100 people, so they only filled about a third of the seats. But within days, there were people lining the streets waiting to get into the cafe to see this amazing event. It was so lucrative that the brothers began opening theaters and sending teams of workers all over the world to show off this new device. And while they were there showing off the device, they would make more films of just everyday things from all over the planet. By 1903, the brothers had accumulated over 2,000 films, though only about 50 or so were shot by the brothers. You see, Auguste and Louis didn't consider themselves artists or filmmakers. They were inventors, and they thought of filmmaking as, well, a novelty that wouldn't last. Louis was famous for saying, "The cinema is an invention without any future." So in 1905, they sold off all their cinematic equipment and retired from the film business completely. They wanted to concentrate on other inventions like color photography. You know, their involvement in the film industry was short, less than 10 years, but many of their innovations were used up until the digital age. And the idea of paying to sit in a theater and watch a film is still costing me money today. One last thought. We get the word cinema from the cinematograph, but the term cinematograph wasn't the brothers. A French inventor, Leon Boly, invented something he called the cinematograph in 1892, but because of financial reasons, sold the rights to this invention to the Lumière Brothers. But if I understand it correctly, they ended up using the name but not the device. Their cinematograph was completely their own invention.